If you're still watching television on a small screen set, you're missing a lot. Here, for example, is a close-up on a 10-inch set. See how much smaller it is than my head? Now I'd like to show you the same close-up on a 21-inch.
All right. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Hope everything's going well with you right now. I'm going to cause myself just a brief bit of echo. Give me a second. This is the easy way to do it. I'm going to cause myself just a brief... Okay. I now know I'm going through the microphone. So welcome, everyone. Impromptu live stream here tonight. I don't know if anyone's actually going to watch this, but I thought it might be kind of fun to give you a little bit of a hint as to an upcoming discussion that's going to be taking place next Thursday, and that's on BHG's stream, BHG Gaming. And let me get a proper calendar up here. Yeah, so that'll be the 19th of May, 9 p.m. Eastern for the regular podcast. And I'm going to be one of the guests, and I need to put together my personal top 10 favorite Atari 2600 games of all time, period. We've already determined no homebrews, so homebrews don't count. But it's going to be a little bit of a challenge because, so here's the deal. Maybe 5 years ago or so, on a Twitch channel that nobody really watches, I had actually done a top 10, personal top 10 list for the Atari 2600 at that time. And so when BHG went and said, hey, do you want to do that again? I was like, yeah, man, I already got it. I already got a top 10 list. I made one up a while back. No one watched it. No one cared, because why would you? But at the same time, I pretty much have a list to already work from. So I went and took a look at that list here tonight in preparation for the show a little bit. I had a couple of minutes. And I was like, I don't like this list at all. This guy's an idiot. No, it wasn't quite that bad. But when I looked at that top 10 list, I was like, wow, I have experienced many more Atari 2600 games since that list came out. In some cases because I purchased the physical cart and was able to experience it authentically. And in some cases, just, through the VCS and other things, you kind of get to discover games that maybe at the time you didn't really know. So I have a top 10 list, and some of the games tonight that you see may be in that top 10 list. But this is not a spoiler for my top 10 list, because when I actually went through the list of games I currently own for the 2600, and put together my top 10 list, I ended up with something like 20-some games. And so some of the games in here are going to be in the top 10, but many of them are not. And what I'm doing is going to reevaluate them. I think they're all excellent games. So this is all kind of an arbitrary exercise, right? But my top 10 list is clearly not going to be the top 10 list I go out with on Thursday. So let's dive in a little bit, shall we, and see what we can actually do here to find what we're looking for. So I am on an actual Atari VCS in PC mode, and I have got the classic controller here that I'm using to play the games. And we're going to start here with Aquaventure, and let me turn down sound. Atari games do have fairly loud sound, but that should be okay, I think. If anyone is in chat, I do see a few people maybe are watching. If you do happen to be there, let me know. So I'm going to reevaluate some of these games. Now, I'm starting off with this one for a specific reason, and that is I don't know that this one actually counts either. Because while Aquaventure is absolutely an original game for the Atari 2600, it was a prototype and never really got released. So it's not homebrew exactly, because it's in the Flashback Classics, it's in the Vault, and it's as official as an Atari game gets for 2022, but it was never a game that you really could own back in the day. So I don't think it really counts. So I think it might be an extra credit. I think I might make my top 10 list 11, because, how you do. And my 11th might be Aquaventure here. But I, definitely when I originally made my list, I had not played much Aquaventure. And it was really Antstream Arcade that got me into it. And BHG, frankly, too, a little bit. And when I actually started playing it, I was like, wow, this is an amazing game for the Atari 2600. It's a shame this never got released. I don't know, maybe it would have been a very different game that had been released at that time or something. I mean, who knows, right? But I can tell you that the game is absolutely amazing. It really is one of the best games for the Atari 2600. Because it offers a lot of cool push-pull strategy. It's got all the hallmarks of some of Atari's and company expense work. Like, you're getting points, but now I'm bringing out the tough ones to dodge. But I should be fine. You, however, need to get out because I was about to run out of air. For a while, I had the #1 score on Antstream. But I think that's not the case. Oh, is that too late? Oh. Oh. Barely saw myself in the background. I should note that I'm playing this through Stella and through the VCS in PC mode, and with the Classic connected wirelessly through Bluetooth, and it's working just fine. Alright, let me do another one of these Aquaventure games. Oh, also, hello, William. Nice to see you. Oh, sound is a little high even at this. Okay, I thought it might be. What I'm going to do is actually turn it down from the game capture card. Yeah, because it did seem a little high. Yeah, this should be better, I think. Alright, well, good to get this out of the way now. Thank you. Also, William, thank you so much for piping up in chat. I don't have any viewers, so it's good, kind of hard to hear this stuff sometimes. Anyway, Aquaventure is a really great game. It just probably doesn't count because it was really only ever a prototype. So I don't think it would be fair to give it a top 10. But at the same time, if it was really like this in 1983, was it? Can you imagine how great a game that would have been if it had been released? Why the heck didn't they? What's going on, man? They're actually, the Atari XP blog has got the best look to date, from what I understand, of the history of Aquaventure, and it does uncover a little bit about, the crash and just kind of the decisions that were happening at the time and what have you. Pretty good article. So it does actually explain some of these answers, which had, for years really just been somewhat speculation. It turned out to be true because it made sense, and there we go. But when I think of Atari 2600 games for my top 10 list, it kind of has to have been out during the game's original life. And so I think I'm not going to count Aquaventure, because it really didn't come out until the era of the flashback. Perfect. Yeah, this is a one more game kind of game. So I've got my keyboard here hooked up. I'm going to go through a few other games on the list, though, just because I do want to kind of go through that. But Aquaventure's got to be on that list, so not quite sure. I'm going to do this in something like alphabetical order, but not entirely, because I'm going to kind of skip around a bit. But I think next is going to be Beam Rider, which is a game also I didn't have at the time because I didn't have the card. I couldn't afford it. And it wasn't until later that I actually was able to discover the game and discover just how amazing it really was as a game, which of course everyone who's played Beam Rider knows, but it really is one of Activision's best games. It was a fairly late period game from what I understand. On a lot of different consoles, I've noticed, but it really is one of the best games of the era for the 2600. Maybe the music, or the sound effects, it's not the music, can get a little annoying after a while, so maybe it could get a ding for that. But the graphics are really cool, and the gameplay is super tough. And it has a cool looking cart, even. Which, of course, many Activision carts were amazing looking. But Beam Rider is kind of a particular favorite. It looks very... I don't know. Kind of stands out. It stands out. I think it's because they went largely fuller label, perhaps, on the imagery than usual, but still, it's quite cool. And the gameplay is good. But is it going to make the top 10? That's the question. I'm not sure tonight. And so I'm just kind of playing through some of these games that are contenders, that are on my mind, that are well, yeah, but what about? And let's see what I end up with early next Thursday, of course. I'm not going to spoil it. But I thought it might be a fun chance to see some of the just playing Stella through the VCS that you can do. It really is a fantastic game. You wonder why there was never a sequel. Maybe there was a sequel and I'm just not aware of it. I don't personally know of a sequel to Beam Rider. It seems like something that could get... Well, how cool would that recharge treatment be? But I have to assume Activision still has it somewhere, probably, right? Yes, because I've seen it on the Activision Classics on the PSP, and I think that may have been the last place the Activision Classics line came out, right? Or did it go to mobile? Maybe it went to mobile after that, but... For my last experience with it was on the PSP, and the Activision Classics did include Beam Rider, so at least at that point they still had control. It was also fun on the PSP, by the way. It's one of the best. fine. Oh, nope. Fine. You get away, Sector 3, this time. So, originally when I was conceiving this potential live stream, I didn't want to announce it because I figured there was just as many odds that some technical issue would come up and then I'd be like, dead it. But originally I wanted to use original hardware, but I did have a technical issue, which is that it looks like my RGB to HDMI converter may have died. Either way, I couldn't get a signal in through the Elgato here, so I had to swap over to Stella. But when I actually started thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, then you can just do it in the VCS and PC mode. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's what I should have done to begin with, so, given this channel. So, kind of worked out, I guess, in the end. But, this game gets tricky. So, I had exposure to the Atari 2600 as a child, and first I think it was probably in about 79 or 80. But I never experienced Beam Rider until really the compilations for PlayStation 1 era and beyond. I played plenty of Atari games, but I just didn't know anyone that had Beam Rider. I never had one myself. Only at that era, only played friends' Atari 2600s. It really wasn't until the PlayStation era that I started buying my own consoles. But the family consoles I had were pretty retro the era too, which in particular was the TI-99 4A and the Apple IIe, so I had plenty of cool games going on. I didn't actually own the 2600, but I had lots of friends who did, so I played lots of 2600 in the early 80s, in particular. Late 70s, early 80s. Alright, that's enough for that one. Let's move on to my next consideration, which is going to be a real tough one. I love this game. The question is it top 10 worthy? And I don't know. I probably put 200 hours into this game over the years. A lot. Because I think it's a very simple and fun, and once you play it for a while, it's almost like meditative. I don't even know. But anyway, I've played this game a lot, both of recent years and just in general on Atari, because it's always been one of my favorites. But, oh, is it one of the top 10? Maybe not. It can be pretty cheap. And it is kind of slow. By modern standards. That's not to say the game isn't good. All these games are great, right? But it's just, I think it's a lot easier when it comes to the entirety of the 2600 library. Probably make something more like a top 40 or 50 than a top 10 specifically. Top 10, you start having to make some real tough cuts. Is Pitfall that great? Is it really? I don't know. I mean, yes, right? What about Space Invaders? I think a couple of these I'll get to tonight. I mean, when I think Atari 2600, I think Space Invaders, so that's gotta count for something, right? But, top 10 game on the 2600. By the way, playing with the classic is great. On PC mode, I understand some people have not had as great an experience as I have, but I've had a great experience just working. And that's been really cool. And over Bluetooth. I don't even have to have it wired, which is really nice. It does this when I've had it both plugged into the Walnut that I have and the Onyx. So I haven't tried this particular setup on my old classic or collectors because it's boxed. I used it as like a main driver for what, a year plus, and I was a little worried about long-term impact, so I decided to swap over to one of the others because I do want that one, the teak, to stay in really nice position. Yeah, Pitfall 2. I remember back when I did those original videos on Twitch, there was a friend of mine named Doug Lundauer. He still streams on Twitch and is real cool. Him and I kind of ended up getting into it a little bit over Pitfall 2 because I personally don't really enjoy playing Pitfall 2 that much. I recognize how important it is from a design perspective and everything, so I'm not saying it's a bad game or anything like that, but it's for me personally, I always found the music to be intolerable, would be the word I would use to describe it. And I never really just got into it, so I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. So what happened to my bump and jump? Or am I not seeing it? Oh, DNJ. Okay. This is another one. I love bump and jump. Really, I really love it in the arcade. So maybe the 2600 version's not the greatest version of this game. But I played a lot of it. And to that extent, it's kind of a personal favorite. And I always felt that it actually held up pretty well as a 2600 game, too. Oh, shoot. This didn't push that time. Alright, I'm a little rusty. I'm on stream. It's made me nervous. Shoot, I'll just read this. I can do this. I believe in myself. Alright. I'm pretty okay at bump and jump. I play this a lot. Okay, so maybe this one, now that I'm reconsidering, maybe this isn't. Do you have top 10? Top 10? Okay, maybe not. But it is a personal favorite. So I guess I've got to... Also, I need to learn... So I will say, I just installed Stella and these ROMs tonight before going live, because I was using a fresh installation of... I was using a fresh installation of Windows, so I hadn't actually done it, and so I can report that I didn't do anything to get this thing working. It just worked. And also, I'm being an idiot. Also, no. Bump and jump, that one I can safely remove. Alright. Next up is a really tough one, because I know I love this game. But is it top 10? Pitfall 2 was the first true platformer. It really is a groundbreaking game. And even the fact that the music does change over time and things like that is really groundbreaking. But the reality, I think, for me and many other people who played Pitfall 2 back in the day is, we didn't have guides to get through and stuff. And I was a kid and I wasn't very good at it. And so in my mind, just that repetitive 6-7 note thing that's at the very start, and I'm not going to do it even though it's like bored into my brain, just drove me so up the wall that I couldn't really handle Pitfall 2. And I also kind of liked the sound very, very much of Pitfall 1. And so I guess I just kind of personally missed that myself. So I never really liked Pitfall 2. And I know that that's somewhat sacrilegious to say. But it is my truth. Because I don't actually like Pitfall 2. I think it's annoying. But I recognize exactly just how groundbreaking it is and all the rest as well. So Centipede is, on the one hand, also a candidate for kind of annoying sound. I mean, how many moms probably of the era of the early 80s would have maybe not minded putting that cartridge in the blender, right? Based on the sound of the spider coming through all the time while our kids played it. But nonetheless, I think it's... I would need to do my history to remember which ports came out at which time. But I would say that Centipede is easily one of the most authentic in terms of gameplay ports from the arcade. I wanted to say it might be the best at the time of that it came out. It was the best that had come out to date in terms of ports. Maybe that's not true. Actually, I already know that's not true. But it's really, really good. And because even though it is just blocky and doesn't have really at all the kind of shooting and everything, it feels different and moves different. They're obviously not using a trackball, although that would have been amazing if they would have eventually added trackball support, but not have been. You can do it using the analog function of the Atari trackball, but not the kind of true sort of trackball mechanical support. And even that's still pretty cool. But it works. It worked really well with the Atari joystick. Because the nudging was just kind of tuned, I think, well for many Atari joysticks of the era and such. And as such, it played very authentically. And it was fun. And it was a game you could get good at. And because it had the lives at 10,000 or whatever, you tended to flip over more lives than you would ever have gotten in the arcade. And so you could kind of get these chains going of really good gameplay. And so I played just the ever-living heck out of Centipede as a kid, as an adult, this week. I mean, honestly, I play Centipede on the 2600 all the freaking time. Because I think it's just really good. And it's also just an easy game to, like, test parts with, if you want to make sure your joystick's working. It's a whole bunch of things, right? So it's become one of the carts that just is always kind of within arm's reach to some extent when I'm messing around with the cards. And I think it's also just a really great game. It really is potentially one of the top 10s for sure. I don't know. We'll see. But it does get dinged for a few things. Graphics maybe could have been. And that sound. Do you really need to do that? Why? Why would you do that? Why? I don't know. I guess it was cool. Things were different then. We were a bit of PC. Yeah, you go back to some of the old Apple IIe, like even on some of the emulators, sounds don't sound very good. And relatively, they're kind of raw and harsh. And then you just have to remember, it's like, well, okay, yeah, but you know what, this actually also happens. So... But I love my TI-99 4A, and I don't think it sounds harsh at all. I even have a voice synthesizer for it, and so I really enjoy doing that. I have actually programmed in the voice synthesizer to say Mockduck plays games. At one point, I wanted to get it into like some kind of intro thing, but then I was just like, I don't really want to do an intro thing. I kind of like the way I do it right now, where I just sort of pop the logo into the watermark somewhere in the video, for the most part. I don't do a lot of intro videos. Yeah, so, and that's the other thing. Did you, yeah, you did miss Beam Rider, Tony. Yeah, Beam Rider. Oh, that is such a tough one. You know, that one's going to have to be a strong contender for that top 10 list. It really is. The problem is there's just so many. Alright, I've played enough Centipede in my life that I can kind of do it in my sleep. So I'm just going to have to reconsider this when it comes down to this top 10. So, I don't know. The next one up, though, is another one that actually I can save... I guess I could say for sure, in the last time I did a top 10, this didn't make it. But then, during the subsequent discussion that I had, someone was like, you really don't think Chopper Command should go on this list? Play it. Tell me it doesn't belong in this list. And then I did, and I was like, oh, I think you're right. So I think Chopper Command maybe does need to go on this list. It does have the same thing as Centipede because you're going to hold down the fire button all the time. Being kind of annoying soundy if you are perhaps an observer in the room or doing something in the background or in the kitchen doing dishes. Or what have you, you know. I'm not great at Chopper. It is a really good game, and it's one of those Activision classics for a reason, because it, I can do better than that. The gameplay is, tight. Very tight. And also, I need to stop doing that. I do the same thing with Defender, by the way. I just work, I'm like, let me just walk right on. But it's got, you know, variety, it's got the sound, it's got that really cool sunset. It has both the sound of the helicopter, but it also almost is like a military beat. It's got that kind of flow gameplay that just Activision was so good at. Just racking up the points, going wave after wave, getting really good at it. Keeping it going. You got a lot of gameplay out of these games. Top 10. I mean, the thing is it in some ways is kind of like Defender. In many ways, I guess it's kind of a Defender clone. But also totally not. Because the consequences feel different, for one thing. And then for two, it really just doesn't play the same. It has elements that kind of the enemies are not nearly as aggressive, and they're not aggressive at all in the same way. So. So the best, the thing about that, Tony, is the best defender alike, I would argue, has got to be Resogun, done by Housemarque, as a PlayStation 3 launch title, if I recall, and maybe PlayStation 4. I don't know. It's an amazing game. It's an absolutely incredible game. One of my... I think I might argue that it may be one of my personal favorite video games of all time. That's how good I think it is. And that is totally a defender alike. So you're gonna have tough competition to try to out-defender like Resogun. But maybe you don't have to. There can be more than one. That's fine too. Right. I'm just saying that's going to be tough to beat. All right, next one I think is a bit of a long shot, but this is another game that I loved at the time. I loved looking at the box. I was a D&D nerd. I am a D&D nerd. I am still a D&D nerd. And as such, Dragonfire was a game that I played the heck out of. In some ways I like, well, I mean, I know it was, more, I think there were, I don't know if the 2600 was the primary console for, I was going to say, I don't think it was. I thought Intellivision was the primary console for Dragonfire, but maybe I'm incorrect about that. But I think this version's the best. Of all the versions I played, anyway. And again, it's got that kind of classic Atari flow, which is kind of short little bits of strategy and luck and skill. And just to combine, if you get good at it, you can extend your game, and it just kind of loops, right? And you got that core loop that ultimately is the sign of all these Atari classics. I always liked the graphics of Dragonfire a lot. I always thought I liked that it was really hard. Oh yeah, please do beat Resogun, by the way. Please do. That would be the best thing. That means you'd be making probably one of the greatest games of the last 20 years. So, there you go. Who doesn't want to do that? I don't know how I could not include Enduro in this list, because I just love Enduro so much. I also, think technologically it probably could get a mention for top 10. It was, I was not an adult consumer of Atari. I was a little kid. I was born in '74. So I was very little when the Atari first came out. So my experience with Atari was really throughout the 80s as I was growing up. Because, maybe in some places the NES reigned supreme in the early 90s, but where I lived with my friends in kind of a rural part of the world, there were still plenty of Ataris around. And we played, I remember playing on an XE, even as late as like 91, 92. And Enduro was one of the games that I would often just play and play, because you could get pretty good at it. And I love the graphics. I think it may have some of the best graphics. And oft emulated as well. And also, I think what year did it come out? 82. Either way, I remember as a kid seeing this game and looking at video game box art and then playing said video game and becoming very quickly aware that the two often did not match up. And when I looked at Enduro, I remember as a kid, I knew Activision was making incredible looking games, and I'd seen, Pitfall, so I knew what they were capable of. But I just kind of remember looking at Enduro and saying, no, that can't be. It doesn't. That's like an arcade thing, you know? And then I remember, seeing it in action at a friend's house and playing it and stuff, and then being like, no, it actually looks that cool, you know? And so maybe there are other games that look better or play better or what have you, but I don't know. Enduro's got an awful lot going for it. I think the biggest knock against Enduro, although, it's in the title, right, is that it tends to be a very long game, especially once you get pretty good at it and know what speed you need to go to get through various days. And then it's really just a matter of refining your best score over time. But that means you reset it for. So I think the burnout is probably fairly real on Enduro, but yet I never really did burn out. I often, when I was looking for an Atari game that I could sit and play for half hour, Enduro would be one I've often come back to because I like that. It's also simple enough to control because once you kind of do set a coasting speed, you can kind of just sort of let it roll, and then you just have to control the stick. As far as that's not actually true, but kind of. So it's a fairly low impact game in terms of the control. So like I remember when I had that PSP, was playing Activision Classics. I was at that time often on an exercise bike and stuff too, and it was a kind of game I could actually play when I was doing some kind of minor repetitive activity like that, and still be able to actually play and do it. So maybe that's part of why I like Enduro, because it's a good kind of long-term game. But I think that is also one of the knocks against it too, right? Because I don't know if there is a short game with Enduro. Yeah, someone's saying most of the Activision stuff had him in awe. Yeah, totally. That said, I never actually liked all of their games. I'll be the first to admit that as much as I love Activision's early stuff, like playing Crackpots. Well, actually not Crackpots, I do like Crackpots. Kaboom, maybe. Actually, playing Kaboom, I don't really like playing Kaboom. It's too hard. There was a couple of like that. Pitfall 2. I never played Hero back in the day. It wasn't until later that I discovered Hero, because when I encountered it, I think it felt fairly inscrutable to me as a kid or whatever. I never really, at one point I also tried playing it, but like, I don't get it. And then I just sort of never went back to it until there were emulators and all of this. Alright, well, this is a long game, so I think I'm just going to cut it here to refresh my memory on it. So, because this game will go on for a while if you let it. So the next one is super easy. But can you not include it in the list? I mean, the theme song alone, right? The theme song alone. So I'm not sure how I could not include Frogger in the top 10. I mean, it is the game that got played. I mean, it's got to have been one of the most played games in Atari 2600 history. Parents would play Frogger. People who weren't really gamers would play Frogger. Your grandmother of 1983 might have even played a game of Frogger, right? So there's the pizza places, and it is such a good port. It really is. one of the 2600's best games. It plays good. It plays fast. Other than a little bit of that kind of, whatever you want to call it, flicker. But, you know, I didn't really notice the flicker that much as a kid. I noticed it, but I guess I just didn't really care. And I suppose that really holds true today. In some ways, I like it more than the arcade. How's that, right? It's a simple game, right? I recently picked up Frogger 2. My saga to get a working Frogger 2 cart to my collection finally ended, thankfully, with a working copy of Frogger 2. Third time's the charm. But I played it, and it's really good. I'm going to need to read the instructions, frankly, because I couldn't quite figure out how I was supposed to go between some different screens and stuff. But Frogger 2 is also really great on the 2600. You know, maybe in the same way that Pitfall 2 could conceivably get an edge over Pitfall, Frogger 2 could conceivably get an edge over Frogger. But for me, I guess I'm just kind of more of a purist. So even if it offers maybe perhaps a little more in the design department, for me, I would go with the original. I can't remember who it was exactly. I think it was Jeremy Parrish, who was a, broadcaster and all that sort of thing. I think one of the Retronauts episodes, or maybe it was on his YouTube channel or something, finally grokked me into the fact that little theme song, that dun 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 dun, is actually like a Japanese jingle for like a commercial. And you can actually find the full commercial on YouTube. And it's really crazy to hear it coming out of from a different context like that. So, just see if I can pull it off now. And that thing moves too fast. All right. And thus ends the journey of Frogger. It's Frogger, right? I mean, how many of us, we've all played a million games of Frogger. But again, it was such a good arcade translation and so much fun to play. It's a real tough call on that one. Because we're not even, we've got so many more to look at and everything, too. Like I said, I'm going roughly alphabetically, except my list was not in order, so I'm actually going back to one. This is one that I played a million times as a kid, and I can tell you for sure that this is not in, like, my top 3. But I played it a lot, and it was really cool as a kid to have that control scheme going through. Is that working? And I like the gameplay very much, and I like the graphics, and I like the sound of it, actually. I think it's got cool sound. It's actually almost like a predecessor of a rhythm game when you think of it, if you want to think of it in a very broad kind of context. In some ways it almost has like rhythm game elements. And it moves quick. I I don't know, that would be it would have to be Activision. But Magic is such a great publisher of Atari 2600 titles. There are so many good Magic games. And I love their carts. I always thought the Magic boxes were the coolest looking boxes. I think really Activision, again, maybe gets the nod there. Or Atari. Actually, they're all great, so you can't pick. But Magic is up there. Come on, you guy. Get in the cosmic arc! Yep. Okay, no, I am having some kind of control issue here. I think the spinner might be causing me a trouble. But I want to keep it active because I'm going to get to a different thing. And besides, we're just kind of rolling through games. All right, that's not that is a good long shot. I'm going to say it's a long shot. I do love that game a lot, though. You know, what's funny is that because that was one that was in that original top 10 list. I had put it low on the list, but I did put it on the list. And then, now that I'm looking at it with a modern sensibility, I'm just like, well, it's not bad or anything. Kind of in the same category, and also by a Magic. Let's deal with this one. I really have had some great times playing this next one. No Escape. By Magic. It's got that cool, weird little thing with it, where it's like, you want to try to bounce it off, right? So you're trying to actually clear the row, and so it's got to come from the top there, otherwise they just respawn. Oh, and also friendly fire. When you start looking deeper into the Atari catalog, you start to see, like, game concepts that you see on the 2600. They never really made it beyond that as a video game design concept. I mean, how many video games nowadays are really kind of about bouncing a moving linear bunch of blocks or something off a wall? Not too many, right? But they're kind of concepts that were really indicative, I think, of the era of, well, let's just experiment. And because for every game that is less successful, you may have one that is the next Yar's Revenge, for example, or Frostbite, you know? There's a lot of options you could put in there. I don't know how many people played No Escape back in the day. I never saw it. So it really wasn't until the emulator scene and everything that I discovered No Escape. And then also when I picked up the actual cart as part of my collection and played it, I was like, wow, I love this game. I actually love this game. And I do. I really enjoy playing it. I think it's really cool. And in some ways, it's just a variation of the Space Invaders kind of concept that was so prevalent in so many Atari games, right? But it doesn't feel like it because of the sort of not puzzle mechanic, but kind of puzzle-like mechanic of trying to get everything working correctly and bounced off the wall and everything. And I thought the graphics were cool. I think the graphics are real cool. They hold up really well. And it's got that classic Atari sound, that I just, I so identify with Atari, right? need to look at these monsters. You know, how many Atari games can boast that they had monsters that looked this cool? I don't see that kind of detail in a lot of the... Well, I mean, you do, but... Like, especially in earlier games, for example. Like, you look at something like an adventure. Can you imagine that they, in just a few years, they would have gone... You know, the ability could have turned into something like this. If there's a downside to No Escape, and I don't know that I even consider it a downside, but if there is a downside, it is that the game can be a little slow, because you do need to strike carefully, and if you try to push it, you just die, and that's kind of the point, right? But at the same time, it does mean that you can sit there kind of waiting for your opportunity to arise. All right. Another one here that I want to take a look at here just to see how I feel. This one... Yeah, this one. I loved this game as a kid, because one, I was pretty good at it. Two, it was kind of easy-ish. Three, I loved the graphics and the sound. And I kind of like the sweep gameplay of it. It just, the whole thing just kind of worked. And this is Spider Fighter, one of many, like I say, many basic kind of pattern-based vertical shooters of the era. I mean, there's a million of them. But the Atari 2600 has some of the best, I think. Certainly of the retro era. And, Spider Fighter, in my opinion, is one of the best of the best. Demon Attack is great, you know. Mega, some people really like them. Is it Mega Mania? It's like the best vertical shooter. Some would just say Space Invaders because, hey, that counts, I guess, right? And there's plenty of other options, too. Maybe you really like Worm War 1. I don't know. But for my money, I think it might be Spider Fighter. I also really love the variety of sprite work that's involved. It's just... I think this is one of my favorite sounding 2600 games. When I think of what does the 2600 sound like, this is the kind of sound that would really kind of come from my mind. Alright, let's move on here. So the next one is... So I should probably preface this by saying this is my personal... This is going to be my personal top 10 list. So of course Tron is in it. I think most current viewers of Mockduck Plays Games would have no reason to suspect, but maybe they would, that I am a huge Tron nerd. And I own multiple copies of Tron on various physical media formats. I do not own it on Laserdisc, but I totally would. They even have some cool Tron toys and things. And I love Tron Deadly Discs. I think it is my personal favorite INTV, Mattel, whatever, game for the 2600. And I think it's just really cool. It's got kind of compelling gameplay, push-pull mechanics. Again, a game you could get pretty good at. Game that's got some strategy if you want it. Is it top 10 though? That's the problem. I mean, it definitely, it's probably just is going to be just, hey, this is my personal top 10. It doesn't matter. No, it totally doesn't matter, right? But, Oh. I only have bad game ideas. No, actually, some of my game ideas have been pretty cool, but I've never had the kind of wherewithal to see it through in any kind of meaningful way. So, all right, what other kinds of ones that I just want to take a look at is another one, and this is Phoenix. So Phoenix is a really cool arcade game, and I have always felt, in some ways, a superior 2600 game. Like, I like it if you put together a list of games that were released for retro game consoles that were better than their arcade counterparts. I think Phoenix might go on that list. I remember, I think, it feeling at the time that it was probably the coolest Space Invaders game I'd played outside of Space Invaders. And I liked that it was like Demon Attack a little bit in some ways in this section. So I could kind of get my Demon Attack itch fulfilled. And it was just so, it was like, wait a second, there's like 3 stages, 4 stages, right? Depending on how you want to count it. And it's like, it was just, even I remember at the time feeling like, wow, I didn't know I could do all that. It does have a bit of annoying music, or background sound problem. Judge, I had to. I present to you Exhibit A. Brings out the tape deck. Oh yeah, well, clearly. Case dismissed. No, but of course, the era we had tolerance for this thing in a way. Like when I go back to some of the Atari or Apple IIe sound games, and I recognize how kind of rough they were and everything. But I remember at the time playing them all afternoon, and not feeling like it sounded maybe harsh. Although even then, I kind of remember it sort of did, but I played it anyway. I didn't mute it or whatever. Oh, there we go. I know, Phoenix, love that one too. I'm not playing it particularly well here. I don't want to start messing with my options settings, but let me just real quick turn off input places, digital dead zone. There was a way I'd solve this one other time because what it'll do is in some games, it'll try to read the paddle as left and right. A few games, not that many, but when it happens, it can be pretty deleterious to gameplay. So there's a way you can turn it off, and I can't remember how to do that right now in the settings, so I'm not going to try to do it live. All right, now this one, it would be weird to have 2 racing games in my top 10 list for Atari. But I might, because pole position. It's one of the greatest racing games of all time. I mean, the arcade game was, at the time, if I recall, people can disagree, I think it may have been in the running for best looking arcade game at the time of its release. Like, when you looked at it, it was a showstopper. You would be like, whoa, look at all those colors and that cool track and perspective, and sit in the seat and you got the cool steering wheel. The whole experience was just something else, right? And especially in an era where we'd grown up playing Night Driver and those old role games and even mechanical games for some of us prior and such, right? Personally. And this was one of the best games for the 2600. It's one of the most common games for the 2600 because everyone owned it, because it was fun. You didn't even have to push a button to accelerate. It did the acceleration for you. But that ended up working in its favor because it allowed you to learn the brake function for the later levels when you actually kind of want to perfect your score and stuff. Which again, like I said, I'm talking in kind of half blindness, which is what I'm doing tonight. I'm not going for a high score. But, I don't know if I do want to include 2 racing games in my top 10 list. And if I had to pick, I think I might go for Enduro or Pole Position. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because I just like the kind of changing day-night perspective so much. Maybe because one of my favorite choose-your-own-adventure books is The Race to Forever, or the Race from Forever, or whatever that was. I can't remember what it's even called, but The Race to Forever. Yeah, hey, William, thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate it. All right. I even like that you have to qualify and such, so that's cool. All right, well we're gonna stop that one there. Okay, pole position though, and so here's another really tough one, and again it's a very obvious one on the one hand, but then again maybe not when you try to fit the entirety of the catalog into one list. Where I'm not seeing. Space Invaders, right? It's the game that made the Atari 2600. Made it the household name because Space Invaders was great, and there was a million Space Invaders clones, but nothing as good at home as Space Invaders on the Atari 2600. The sound of Space Invaders is the sound of the Atari 2600, isn't it? Maybe not. Certainly representative of earlier Atari 2600. And I might argue that it is sort of like if you were to call people's brains of what they recall from the 2600, how much are you going to hear Space Invaders? It was used in movies, right? It was used in movies for years as like the sound of video games. I think they got replaced by Mario eventually, right? But when little Johnny's trying to warn the family about Jason, Space Invaders. And it's fun. And it really is just an excellent port, and especially when you think of when it came out, right? I mean, the state of video games was so different. It was such a leap, really, kind of over the Pong and Circus and things like that, right? Which were good, but, Space Invaders was so cool as a home console game that obviously it ended up being a package and such. But can it not be in the top 10 of the Atari 2600? What would there be if there had not been Space Invaders for the 2600? What would the console market be like? way to know. We're talking alternate reality there, right? And I like that it's got 2-player, that it's got, you know, the kind of fat ship version and the skinny ship version. I like the modes that you don't get in regular Space Invaders of, like, invisible, you know, enemies and things like that. And so it was cool. Even it was more robust than, like, the arcade experience, and so offered, like, a full home experience that you couldn't get even in the arcades, really. And so, clearly, Space Invaders has got to be one of the all-time top. The aliens, as kind of clunky and funny as they are, were probably the coolest-looking things on the 2600. I still love those little square guys, or kind of rectangle, whatever, home-shaped things with television antennas. And I like the guys like, wah, wah, wah. Right below him, too. Also the jumping jack guy. The guy who's shuffling with the shoes on. I mean, they're aliens. They're trying to kill you. That doesn't mean they can't. All right. Well, so there we go with Space Invaders now. Just a couple left I want to look at here. And I'm probably going to end the show in another 10, 15 minutes here. So, what do I have left to go through? I have got... Yeah, I have to look at this one again. Not that... I can guarantee you this one's going to be on the list somewhere. Trick is where? And that is Sequest. Again, another Activision classic, but gosh, do I love Sequest. I play so much Sequest on the original hardware that I just have a cart just kind of like permanently out. I don't bother adding it to the collection anymore because I'm constantly pulling it out and playing it. You know, and in some ways it's not entirely dissimilar to Aquaventure. But, you know, where Aquaventure's got the multiple kind of screens. I am so excited to see Aquaventure finally get released by Atari XP. I hope that actually happens. That would be super. Defender's your favorite. So I was never very good at Defender, so I don't think Defender makes my top 10 list simply because I just never played it a whole lot because I was just too bad. I played the most Defender... Do you know what I played the most Defender on? I played the most Defender as an NTEX portable game from that era. Oops, shoot. Oh. I think I was gonna make it. Yeah, there was NTEX made a really fantastic LED, if I recall, color version of it that had a really nice hyperspace, and I got it for Christmas one year, and I played it for years. That's the most Defender I ever played. And then the aforementioned Resogun, which I actually have the PlayStation Platinum trophy for. Yeah, I do love... I mean, Sequest is an amazing game. I'm playing it terribly right now, but that's okay. That's okay. It's just like the sound, the music, again, the color. Maybe that morning. I recently started playing a bunch of Defender 2 because I finally picked up a loose cart copy of that. I had not prior had it in my collection. I mean, I guess that was a year ago when I maybe did this, but I played a whole bunch of Defender 2 and really got to reappreciate just how good a game Defender 2 is as well. Stargate / Defender 2, right? This is a game that I have put in exceptionally long gaming sessions with as well. I would love... Yeah, I know. It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. Do you know how much I would love to see an Activision Recharge series? That's what Atari and Activision need to get together, say we love each other and we love money even more, and make a whole bunch of Activision Recharge games. Just don't do Pitfall. Just don't try it. I don't think that would work out. But do Sequest, a whole bunch. Not that you couldn't do a good Pitfall. It's just as soon as you try to do a good Pitfall, it becomes such a different project. Like a Sequest. Get Activision to do Sequest, that's what I want. That would be awesome. You see, you get the sense they could do it quite well, and I haven't seen them do this kind of navigating the vertical screen back and forth kind of gameplay mechanic that a lot of these 2600 games have. So perhaps there would be something there of interest in them to kind of play around with it and give that treatment. Not that they could do an Activision. It would be fun something. Alright, enough of this, because I do know this one. So, I want to move up to one I'm less sure how I mean, I do know this game. It's another contender for one of the best looking 2600 games. It also plays very well. Not that Battlezone doesn't play, but I always felt Robot Tank was superior to Battlezone. Only because it had an opportunity for me, well, later. But it does everything Battlezone does great on the 2600, but because, of course, it doesn't have the graphics, like the Robot Tank just a little bit more. Just a little. I don't dislike Battlezone for the 2600. It's not a personal favorite. I think in some ways it doesn't quite succeed as well as some of the other ports, really because of the challenges of the gameplay and the vector graphics and the tank controls and just everything else. I think in some ways they had to do it first, and then eventually others could kind of perfect it, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. I I happen to have a boxed copy of Robot Chicken that I like very much. I kind of sometimes just have it hanging out on the shelf to look at because I think it's one of the cooler looking box arts. And maybe not, but I just always personally found it great. All right, yeah, I don't know. Top 10, probably. I like it though. I like it a lot. Warlords 4-player is probably a personal top 5 experience. But we're not talking about top 5 experiences. We're talking about top 5 games. So I'm going to have to kind of think about, like, I think in 2022, playing 4-player Warlords can be one of the best experiences that you can have as a 2022 gamer on the Atari 2600, because it's just fun. It's so fun. But you got to have 4 players, 4 working paddles, all the other kind of stuff, and there you go, right? And if you don't have that, I don't know that Warlords is quite top 5 material for me personally. I want to look at, I've looked at it, I play a ton of it here, but I want to take another look. Super Breakout is another one of those that's kind of like, such a well-known game that it almost is hard to fit in there. By the way, the paddle twist just working, right? Like I know they just, yeah. I know they've done Breakout, but I really want Super Breakout instead. I think Super Breakout's the superior. Is there a 2600 top 10 list that wouldn't include Super Breakout? Sure, right? But how important and iconic is the paddle to the 2600? You kind of feel like the paddle needs to get a mention, right? And is there a better game for the paddle? Than Super Breakout? I mean, obviously, as a single-player experience. So it almost surely has to make it. It just has to. It also has my favorite, I think one of my all-time favorite box art bits too. I love the box of Super Breakout. I like the instruction manual, I like the cart. I just like the overall vibe of it. It's super fun. You see a little jitter getting picked up. Battle there. Yeah, Solar Storm is real good. And there's Demons and Diamonds is a really great 2-player. Warlords, the aforementioned, is really, really great. I mean, there's a ton of really good ones. But I mean, I think in terms of, if you're just gonna, I think it might be the most iconic, certainly. If not Pong, I guess. And it had the different kind of modes and everything too. It was colorful and pretty. And I like the sound of it. It's not annoying. I don't think. And there we go, Super Breakout. All right. So any other final games I want to kind of think about quick before I start working on my list here before the end of the evening. Any other games I wanted to look at? We get one more. Well, I'm going to have to think real long and hard about where River Raid fits on that list as well. I mean, I can't imagine. Go. I can't imagine a top 10 list without River Raid. This was... Well, no. I can't. I'm not even going to say that. I love it. The thing that I really like about Yar's Revenge is that I get that it was sort of based on Star Castle, but it doesn't really feel like playing Star Castle. You know, even recently you can go to an emulator and play Star Castle, and it doesn't feel at all really like playing Yar's Revenge. Not really. And the thing about Yar's Revenge is it doesn't really feel like anything. It doesn't feel like anything else, you know? Also, how cool is that? Even to this day, I don't know that there's another game that feels like Yar's Revenge. I don't think it's ever been emulated. It's been kind of emulated. You know, there's been a lot of things kind of like it. But none of them that really do the Yar's experience. And I think that that's kind of incredible that that's such a popular game that was a huge hit. So many people have played it over how many years and everything, and nobody's really outdone Yar's for out-Yar's Yar's. You kind of have to wonder why, right? What is it about the kind of secret sauce about Yar's Revenge that makes it so kind of unique, I guess, in its own place? Because in some ways it is, you know, it is a little like sarcastic. You know, some of the mechanic of firing a bomb off had been used prior and will be used, you know, afterwards. I mean, even Arcade Tron to some extent has a little bit of that. But nothing feels like playing Yar's Revenge. Nothing else on the Atari feels like playing Yar's Revenge on the Atari. Even the Atari never got a game that played like Yar's Revenge. And again, the sound, right? Is there sound? It's gotta be one of the coolest sounding 2600 games. It feels like you're entering some kind of sci-fi hyper zone and firing off your bombs, and then when you're successful, it's got that rubber shoo, 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 and you're like, yes! Yeah, you know, I mean, I think probably a bunch of people who may ever see this segment, if anyone ever does, will know that will probably have read Once Upon a Atari by Howard Scott Warshaw, released in recent years. And he talks in that book about what would he do to update Yar's Revenge. What would he do to solve what few shortcomings it has and some things like that. And it's a really interesting read. I'd love to see him or someone else do it. I kind of feel like maybe he should get first crack if he really wants to do a new Yar's Revenge. I think he should be the one to do it. But if not, I think there's a bunch of people. You know what you don't see much in video games? Maybe there is a game like this, but I can't think of it. You see it in film where you'll take a subject and then have multiple directors do like shorts essentially on that subject. How cool would it be to see almost like a mixtape of various game designers do their own kind of take on updating Yar's Revenge, right? And then just release the whole thing as a package of, like, you know, Artistic takes on yours are better, essentially. Yeah, I have played Yar's Return. I never quite had the same magic for me, but it too was a really good game, you know, sure. But I never really got into the magic of it. Now I understand for Atari XP they're actually going to be doing some updating to it, very specifically to address, you know, to make it even better. And so I have a feeling like if you're into Yar's Return, this Atari XP thing, is assuming it actually happens, is going to be really, really cool. All right. Well, I kind of have gone through all the games that I still had questions in my head about that I kind of wanted to play one last time before I started thinking about this list. And all the rest of the games that are on the list really are can just kind of sit where they are. So I think I'm just going to wrap up the show here. I thank you for stopping by. It looks like we had a few people watching. E, Tony, William, Ozzy. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you stopping by. My next video is going to be one of the DOSBox games. And I'm trying to decide, do I want to go kind of military and go for something like Ancient Art of War in the Skies, which was the first release that I never did a video on, or if perhaps I want to do something that might be a little more fun, like Fast Break, arcadey baseball or basketball game. So that's next. Now that I got the most recent video out, what the heck did I just do the most recent video on? Oh yeah, the DOSBox Micro Soccer, yes. Micro Pro Soccer. And I enjoyed that, actually. I've been playing that more than I thought I would. All right, well, thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.